Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Start some music in the background. Thanks for joining today. We are going to be taking a look at updating a podcast website from a static design or from a static website to a Symfony 4 application. We're going to take a look real quick just to see what the site looks like currently. So this is actually a local version of the application. It's a pretty simple index page. If we click into each one of these episodes, we're going to see each episode has an image that goes along with it. This one's actually not showing up for some reason. Here we go. So we should have an image that shows up with it. We have a inline player in case people want to play from online from the website itself. And then we have show notes as well. So we have show notes, and we started to recently do transcription using rev.com. So that's actually added yet another layer in what we're trying to do on our application. So we want to be able to automate some more of this and make sure that the whole process is a lot easier to do. So that takes us back to our goals. So one of the things we want to do is we want to handle the uploads ourselves and start hosting things ourselves. Right now we're using a third-party server to do that for us. And it's not incredibly nice. It's a bunch of steps that we have to do in order to be able to get this to work right. The other thing that the static site doesn't let us do very easily is post episodes in advance. So if we want to post an episode that's supposed to happen in a little, say, in a week from now, we don't really have that capability. You have to actually create the file names with the date in them in the current design and be ready in advance for when you want to do it. And then someone actually has to go and make that change. I'd also like to do some light Twitter automation. We've been doing some stuff with Meet Edgar for a while to try and get more Twitter engagement. It's not really working out so well these days due to the changes that Twitter has been doing to the platforms. So I'm not sure how far we'll get on this, but it would be nice to have that as an option. Both Dave and I have talked about trying to do a tech radar on our site, and it would be a lot easier to build and manage, I think, if we had an application. So that's something we wanted to do. And we also want to take some more of our stats in-house and do something with stats that are a little more interesting than the stats that we get from our current host. So sort of the process that we're going to follow here to bootstrap this is we're going to take a look at that podcast website design, which we've already done. We've done that a little bit, so we're going to check this off. We're going to create a Symfony Flex skeleton in a brand new repository. We're going to use and set up Symfony's Encore package. This is actually going to be the thing that will help us do some more of our front-end stuff. I'm going to make sure and get Tailwind installed. Tailwind is a CSS toolkit. And then we're going to work on submitting some docs for Tailwind, SAS, and Encore. There's some weird things that happen, which we'll see in real time. Then we're going to go ahead and update the docs so that other people don't have to go through the same things that we did on this. We might take a look at some of the static pages, the newsletter page and the about page. And just to show you what those look like, we do have these two navigation items. So we have a page that's just static, and then we have an about page as well. That has some more information about us. So these are static pages. I don't expect these things to change very much. So what I think we're going to do is just create these as static pages within the Symfony routing file that would make this all look pretty nice. And then finally, if we still have some time before the end of this session, I'd like to start working on the primary navigation. As you can see, it actually doesn't look very nice up here. Since I have the screen zoomed in, this stuff doesn't collapse quite the way I want it to. So even now, the current design needs some work. There's maybe going to need to be a little bit of JavaScript here as well. So we'll see what we can do if we actually get to that point. So first off, we're going to go ahead and create this Symfony Flex skeleton. And we're going to go down here, and we're going to do composer create project. So we're going to use Composer to create a project. That's how Symfony Flex works. We're going to create the project based on Symfony skeleton, and then we're going to name it that podcast. So I already have that podcast.io. This new repository, I'm just going to call that podcast. And we're going to see what this does first, kind of get an idea of what's happening here. And then we're going to go take a look at Symfony skeleton just to give you an even clearer idea of what had gone on here. So we installed the skeleton, and then we'd run essentially Composer install inside the directory that we've created. And then this application includes Symfony Flex and a bunch of PSR things. And these are the dependencies of the project we just created. And then there's also some scripts that get executed, and then it creates some files that that were created with some of the recipes from Symfony Flex, which we'll take a look at those in a bit too. It looks like someone's already maybe updated the Webpack Encore install instructions. So we'll take a look at that. So we'll click into that URL as well. One of the things that you'll notice from Symfony Flex install right away is it gives you the instructions for creating your own web server. There's also the ability to create a more pleasing server as well if you want to use this. So we might install that eventually, but I do have Laravel Valet running, which makes everything run a lot more nicely. So I'm going to go into the Astrocasts. No, sorry. We're going to go into that podcast directory and take a look at what's here. So it created a bunch of things for us. It has a bin directory, it has source directory, var, all the vendor stuff that you would expect since it has actually done a Composer install on this. But if we want to look at what this project looks like, Symfony skeleton. So this is the entire Symfony skeleton Composer package. If we look at the Composer JSON file, it requires some things, special versions of PHP, wants certain extensions to be installed. But this is all it is. This repository is extremely simple. Where most of the work happens is in the Symfony Flex dependencies. And what Symfony Flex does is give you a few things. The biggest thing is access to recipes, which you can find more information about at symfony.sh. So if we look at Symfony Framework Bundle, we're going to go check out the recipe of this. And what we have here is the manifest file. So this is where, because Symfony Flex was in the main Composer JSON, it looked for any recipes for any of the dependencies that are here. So we have Symfony Framework Bundle as a dependency. So it looks for a Symfony Framework Bundle recipe. And so here's where we see things like AppEnv, app secrets, trusted proxies, trusted hosts. This is in the environment file. So if I look at the env file, .dist, we'll see that these things are being copied in. So this is where the root content or the base content from the skeleton is coming from. It's looking in things like the public directory. So there's an index.php. And if we look inside our application, we'll see public index.php. So even though the actual core package that we installed was pretty small, the skeleton that we created, because Symfony Flex was in play, it was able to find some more information to try and install into the application as well. So I'm now going to try and jump into PHP Storm with this new directory. And here we go, that podcast. In current window, let's try that. All right. So this will give us a better idea of all the things that actually got installed. Inside the bin console is a starter for a Symfony console application, so that if we add console commands or if other people Other packages that we bring in have console commands. They'll be available right away. The config directory is something that's pretty new for Symfony 4. The way that things are broken out for individual packages. So here we see packages, routing, packages, framework. These are things that originally in older versions of Symfony would have been in one big file. Now they're individual files in individual files, which means that recipes are able to be installed and removed more easily, which means that libraries and Symfony bundles can be installed and removed independent of the rest of the application. There's a bundles file that keeps track of all of the bundles that are installed, and then it says which environment it's available in. So this could be dev, this could be test, this could be prod, or all. In this case, framework bundles available in all. Public directory, another change that is kind of new for Symfony 4. So there's just one index PHP. Because of the way that we're leveraging the .env components, we're able to get away with just having one index.php. So there's no longer an app and an app dev style thing. So we get it all right here. The source directory starts out with a kernel. This is the base kernel that you can build on if you need to. And then there's a controller. So here, it's just get ignored because this is an empty directory. var contains any of the read-write directories. So we have cache. So here's where the container cache lives now. And then we have the log directory, which doesn't have any information. We can see that one of the things, let's see, why is this not, I don't know why this isn't scrolling for me. All right, then let's just not use it. All right, so we're going to look at some of the other files. Symfony.lock is Flex's, sort of like the Flex version of composer.lock. So what it contains is a list of everything that was installed with the recipe information. Symfony Flex also has this notion of bundles. No, not bundles, packs. And so that's where this information would be stored. So that's the main bits. If we look at these two files, we'll see that these are also managed by Flex. So here we see that this chunk of the .env file was managed by Symfony Framework Bundle. And if we look at gitignore, we'll see that it has some things from Framework Bundle as well. So you can do whatever you want to this file, but just try not to do anything to any of the managed sections that are related to any bundles that are installed. So now I should be able to see something here. So I'm going to go to podcast.test, and we get to see welcome to Symfony. So what this actually is the there's something capturing the 404 error, and so it looks to see if there's a 404 error, and if you're in dev mode, it gives you this response. And it actually says that you're seeing this page because debug is enabled and you haven't configured any homepage URL. So if we go in, we can go into .env and say appenv is prod, and what we're going to see now is a proper error. So this is just a nice thing that the Flex ships with so that you don't get something really weird when you first visit the site that you fire up without providing a default controller, which was one of the problems with Symfony 2 Standard Edition. You ended up with controllers, if you use the demo bundle, they were just there. They took up space. If you didn't need them, you didn't need them, and sometimes it was confusing why they were there. So with Symfony 4 and Symfony Flex, it just does some more interesting things for you. So we're going to now go ahead and create our first controller. And in order to do so, I'm going to use Symfony Flex to actually install things. So in composer require, I'm going to require some dev dependencies, and we're going to do maker. And what Maker is a way to provide some templates for creating different pieces within a Symfony application. So if we go bin console now, what we see is this make command. You can create auth, you can create commands, controllers, CRUD. There's a bunch of things that you can do here to get started quickly. So the thing that I'm going to do is make controller. I'm going to call this home. And this is another nice thing about the Symfony Flex ecosystem. It allows more easily for you to opt into certain things without having to make micro pieces of stuff. So rather than saying that when I added the maker bundle, it needed to also require annotations, it's doing some real-time looking into the application to see what's going on. So here we're saying, hey, you know what? You can do make controller, but you're going to need require annotations. This is one of the ways that Symfony is moving away from having to require everything up front, which can be kind of nice. So we're going to do, make sure we have this first. So we're composer require annotations. And we want these anyway, so for some of the stuff we're going to do, so I think this will be fine. So now it's adding a bunch of new dependencies. I should have done this earlier. Git init dot git add. I'm going to first make sure that everything is in Git so we can see some fun stuff as we go along. Composer JSON, config. Okay. So after all of these require commands, what we end up seeing is the same bit of info. So some files may have been created or updated to configure your new packages. So we're going to take a look real quick to see what sort of things might have been added. We're going to look inside the packages directory, and we'll see now we have Sensio Framework Extra. So this means that if we look at our bundles, we see that there's now two more bundles. There's Maker Bundle and Sensio Framework Extra Bundle. The Maker Bundle is only available in Dev, and the Framework Extra Bundle is always available. So I think that Sensio Framework Extra Bundle is where we got the annotation support. So we also see we can do Sensio Framework Extra, router annotations false. I'm not exactly sure what we need to do in this file, if anything, but this file came from the Sensio Extra Bundles recipe. Just to refresher on that, if I look up annotations, we see Sensio and Framework Extra Bundle, and you see there's aliases here. This is something that I just forgot to mention, but when I required annotations, Symfony Flex hooks into Composer, and when Composer looks for annotations, it looks at Symfony SH to see if there are any aliases for that package. So I'm going to check into Framework Extra Bundle to see what's going on here. Disable route annotations. Okay. If we look in the manifest, we see that it copies from recipe, the config directory, and then this is where it specifies the aliases. So if we look at the config packages, we see Sensio Framework Extra Bundle that has the same content here. So this is how Sensio Flex manages the application. Dealing with bundles in older versions of Symfony were a little more complex than this. So this is a nice way to sort of make it easier for the installer to install the dependencies, but also the configuration dependencies. In the past, if we had decided to, say, delete this, or remove the Sensio Framework Extra Bundle, we'd have to go into the configuration file and remove this file, or remove the information that this file currently contains. With Flex, since it's in its own file, it knows that when it removes Sensio Framework Extra Bundle, it can just delete this YAML file entirely. So it's really a lot easier to manage applications this way. All right, so I'm going to git commit initial project. All right, so now as we do fun things with the Flex project manager, we'll be able to see stuff a little better. So now I'm going to try again to create the controller called home. Success. Okay, so created source controller, home controller. So we're going to go back now and look at home controller and see what it looks like. All right, so it's using some things. It's using the abstract controller. It's using route annotation. It specifies the route as /home with the name and then an index. And by default, it looks like it's returning JSON. So we're going to try and hit this URL and see what we get. It's already behaving a little differently than the last time I ran this. So if I go to hello, sorry, the page I'm looking for cannot be found. No, it was home. There we go. Welcome to your new controller. So that's awesome. However, it's not exactly what I was expecting. It's expecting some stuff with Twig. So I'm going to go back to the recipes and find out which thing I need. And I know that I want the Twig bundle. And it looks like templates, Twig, or Twig bundle would all have given me that. One of the problems that I ran into early on is I did templating, which is actually a Symfony component on its own. So I didn't get what I was expecting in that case. So I guess what I really want is just Twig, because Twig will give us what we're looking for. So Twig, composer, Twig. All right, so it installed Twig Bridge, Twig Bundle. Its status now is going to show us the thing that changed. Config bundles changed because now we have the Twig bundle as well. We can see that the Twig YAML package was added. And then home controller was added. This was from earlier. Let's look at what's inside templates. Okay, so it's the base HTML Twig. Okay, so I'm now going to remove home controller and try to make it again and see if it does it differently this time. Yeah, so the maker bundle's pretty smart. So since I now have Twig enabled within the application, or since I've required Twig, it's actually creating a template for me, and it's creating, it's expecting that I'm going to be using Twig for this. So now we have home index.html Twig with the controller name of home controller. If we look at rendering this page now, hello home controller. So what we did was shown more of the support that a bunch of the Symfony Flex stuff does to look at what you have installed, and it behaves slightly differently depending on what's there. Either it blocks what you're trying to do entirely until you install the correct dependencies, or it will write different stubs for you depending on what's installed. So in the first case, we didn't have Twig yet, so it created a JSON default controller. Once we had Twig installed, it created one that was a little more meaningful. So I'm going to go back now and change this. I want the route to be /. I can still call it home because it's still going to be the home page. And reload this now. So that podcast.test. And now it's rendering here. Still says home controller. I can change this to whatever I want. Yay. All right. So all it's doing is passing in the controller name. It's not actually meaningful. It's just the controller name that you used when you created the controller to begin with. So we sort of have a general idea how this stuff's supposed to work now. We have sort of enough stuff to start doing some templating. I'm going to add these changes. So Twig packages, Twig routes, dev, templates, base. There we go. Forgot add. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna leave the home controller stuff out of this one. So I'm gonna say this is diff composer JSON, add twig, and git add source, add home controller, home page. All right, so next step is installing, well, actually, so we created the Symfony Flex skeleton. The next step is doing Encore. I think one last piece I want to add on Flex skeleton is going to be the debug. So Symfony debug bundle. So Symfony debug pack. So here's an example of a pack. Symfony debug bundle is an actual package for which there exists a recipe. Symfony debug pack isn't actually going to be an actual package. So if we go into the package itself, we see that it requires other things. So it requires easy log handler, monologue bundle, debug bundle. If we look at the package, it's just a virtual package that requires other things. So I'm going to Symfony require our composer rec debug. And this is where things get to be a little different between how Symfony Flex works versus Composer. If I look in Composer JSON, all I see that was added was the debug pack, despite the fact that it actually installed a bunch of other Composer packages. This is because this is the nature of a pack. The Symfony Flex team wanted to have the ability to have virtual packages that came as one unit. So it can be a little confusing at first if you see all of this stuff installed, but you don't actually see those. Where those end up is in symfony.lock. So here we can see all of the things that were actually installed in addition to the main package that the debug pack that's listed right here. So it's neat, but it sometimes feels a little weird. So I'm going to add all of these. Actually, I'm going to run it first. If I go back to home, yep, now we have our nice little debug bar. So this could be useful for us in some of the stuff we're going to be doing later. So that'll be the end of our skeleton. Composer and Symfony. Debug. Cool. All right. So next step is Encore. What Symfony Encore is a nice way to manage Webpack. And it was highly inspired, I believe, by Laravel Mix. I was just mentioned in chat moments ago. So what we need to do is require Symfony Webpack Encore, and then we run yarn install. So this is the first bit. Now if we look at what the recipe is for it, Encore, Webpack Encore pack, is that what it was? Yeah. So let's take a look at the Encore pack. Let's look at the package details and the recipe. So package details first, it requires Symfony asset. There really is no Webpack Encore thing that exists within PHP, at least as I understand it. It's a JavaScript application, so that's why there's a Webpack Encore pack, to be a placeholder for a PHP package that doesn't exist. If we look at the recipe, we see that we're copying stuff from the assets directory, package JSON, Webpack config.js. See the aliases, adding things to get ignore. So we see node modules, the public build directory, and then a couple of error and debug files. And we can look and see what all of these start with. So we can see app CSS starts with the background color of light gray, and JS starts with an app.js that requires app.css. All right, so Composer, Rec, Symfony, Webpack Encore bundle. Just want to double check to make sure that was right. Yeah, I'll just copy and paste it instead. All right, so status, we'll see that all of the files that we expected to be changed were. There's an assets folder. This contains the information we saw on the recipe, so everything is working more or less as expected. We can look at the package.json file. So this is the package.json file that ships with Encore, and it gives you a couple of scripts that can be run pretty easily. I'm going to remove the license. Not sure I need to do anything more with that, and then I'm going to run install. All right, so what this is doing is getting everything that we need for Webpack to run within the expectations of the Symfony framework. So get status. So this created a Webpack config.js. Actually, that may have been there earlier. And this is where you configure how Encore is actually going to work. Config assets, yarn.lock. So as far as yarn is concerned, it's now locked to these dependencies. If we look at yarn lock, it's similar to composer lock. All right, so that's installed. So we have Encore, and I guess we should run it. So we can do yarn run dev. And it created 3 files in public build. And here we see app.css and app.js. Let's go take a look at those real quick. App.css. This has some of the source map stuff set up. We'll see how we can configure that in a bit. But we see that it copied over the background color as you'd expect. App.js. This is a little more interesting because there's more stuff in it. But it's more or less what we had expected before. Let's see if I can find out where that actually looked. Oh, here we go. So here's some of the stuff that we could see in plain text in app.js earlier. So it's created these files, and it also created something called manifest. And what the manifest does is maps the virtual name, if you will, of the assets that were created with Webpack to where they should be stored on disk. This is useful when you start doing asset versioning, which we're going to try and do in a little bit here. Or at least we'll see where we enable that. All right, we're going to hop back into PHP Storm, and let's take a look at the Webpack config file. So I'm not going to change anything with where we're going to put stuff. We'll just put it in public build. Public build path used by the web server. So this is why where we end up with the / build version of the string. And then manifest prefix key, which we're not going to do anything with that for now. We're only going to work with this app.js. We're not going to add other entries. I was doing some stuff on another project where I was actually creating CSS stuff intentionally here, but that didn't really end up working very well. So I'm just going to try and do everything with app.js. Some additional configuration stuff. Source maps are only going to be created when Encore isn't in production. We're going to enable versioning only when it is in production. So this creates files with a little hash in it, so that every time you create a new version of those files, it'll drop them out with a brand new file name. So this is the part where things get a little interesting. I'm going to enable the Sass loader. And this is going to be fine for our application at first, but as soon as we add Tailwind, things are going to go a little wonky. I'm going to uncomment these, or remove these rather, and head back to here and run yarn make dev. Oh, yarn run dev. Let's see if it still goes. Okay, so we got an error. Let's see where the error is. Okay, so I've enabled the Sass loader, but I actually need to add it as a dependency. So in this case, it's actually giving us a little bit of a heads up. So I'm going to run this command to add these bits. And once that's done, we'll try running it again. Make sure everything is good. Yep. Okay, cool. So we're going to make a change now. Status. Let's add get ignore composer JSON assets. Webpack config and yarn. And we're going to do okay. So everything right now is working fine, except we're not actually using Sass. So what we need to do is go into our assets directory and change things a little bit. Inside the JS file, app.js, I'm going to delete this. Any CSS you require will put into a single CSS file. All right, so I'm going to change this to app.scss. I'm just going to leave it in the CSS directory. So what this now is doing is trying to find not app.css, but an SCSS file. If I do a build right now, it's going to fail because it can't find that. Which makes sense because it doesn't exist yet. So what we're going to do is go into CSS and we're going to rename. Actually, I'm going to do this from the command line. Assets, CSS, app.css to assets, CSS, SCSS. Okay, so what we end up with now should work. So let's do yarn run dev. Cool. All right, so now it's actually doing Sass stuff, which is great. Let's see if we can actually get it to do Sass stuff, though. I don't know. Someone just asked if it is finished, and I just noticed that I had the offline screen, and I don't know why. I'm not sure what happened there, but my bad. So what I had done was I run yarn run dev after enabling post CSS. So it's telling me that I don't have post CSS loader installed. How long was I offline? It looks like I'm seeing people saying that I was actually lost for a little bit, which is a bummer. So I'm going to go ahead and add post CSS loader. And let's see what happens now. All right. So this time it worked, which is interesting to me. But I think it's because we didn't actually try to bring Tailwind in. As soon as we bring Tailwind into the application, it's going to be a problem. So we're just going to leave this for now and call it good. But we need to add the pre-flight structuring main style sheet like this. So this is how Tailwind gets in. So we need to do a pre-flight. And then we do Tailwind components. So this These two pieces are separate, but they're pretty important. And then you can do whatever you want to, and then you require the Tailwind utilities. So we're going to add these now. All right, so right at the top here, Tailwind Preflight, Tailwind Components, and then at the bottom, we'll do Tailwind Utilities. All right, and if I run this now, it actually is doing stuff. Here we go. So emitted value instead of an instance of error. So resolve URL loader cannot operate. The CSS error, it's missing this. So the problem is pretty confusing. If we look at it, there is some talk on here. So if you're using a preprocessor, note for SAS users, due to an unresolved issue, to use SAS with Tailwind, you'll need to disable processing URLs. So what we need to do, which isn't specified here in the Webpack Encore docs, is we need to tweak things a bit. We're going to go into the Webpack config and see here. So enable SAS loader. And I don't remember exactly where I got this. I think I had to look through the docs for a little while to figure out exactly what was going on. But resolve URL loader, we need to turn this off. So and it's important that it's the second argument here, not the first. I had done this for a while, trying to figure out why it didn't work, but it's actually the second argument. So we're going to try and run this again and see if that fixes it. If not, then I have to do something else. All right, let's be a callback function. Right. Best loader option callback option. I don't remember if I actually have to return that. May not actually have to return. All right, so now it works. So I'm gonna see what I did here. Yeah. I actually don't have to do anything. Okay. We'll make sure and do that. There we go. Cool. So this is what we need to do in order to be able to use SAS along with Tailwind because of the way Tailwind's written with post CSS. So this is where I'd like to actually get this into the doc so that it's there the next time I need it. So first of all, I'm gonna add these here. So we got everything we need. Tailwind. All right. Now we're going to try and figure out if we can get something submitted to the docs here. Tailwind. Yeah, here we go. We have docs. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna fork this. And I don't have any idea what they're using. It's like it's Jigsaw. It's like we can use npm to install, composer install. All right, so let's see what we can do. It's always nice to be able to actually test changes when you make them. So someone in chat just asked, why not git add all? I do that sometimes, especially after I've done git status and I see that only things have been modified. Other times I like to be a little more specific. I guess I have seen some developers just always git add a whatever, and to me that at least doing a git status beforehand. Yeah, git add patch mode also is recommended or just mentioned on chat. Yeah, so I do commonly do git /a only after a git status, but every once in a while I get very specific and pick them. I don't really know why I do that, to be honest. So I'm going to go to my code directory, git clone, and do this to tailwind CSS docs. All right, so source. Let's see, where are we going to be? Probably installs docs. All right, so configuring tailwind CSS, SAS. Oh, for SAS users. I'm just gonna take this and essentially paste it below here. Pass options, post CSS loader. I don't know what brunch is, but I think that's another thing. So note for SAS users, issue with one of Mix's dependencies. To use SAS with Tailwind, you'll need to disable and resolve URL loader. See, enable post CSS loader exports. All right, we'll get down to here. And oh. All right. Oh, interesting. So apparently this issue has been resolved anyway. Let's see if we can take a look at that here. Alright, so please refer to 97 as version 3 may help any open issues. Oh, okay, so it looks like it was closed because it's too old, and they're hoping that 3.0 is better. So, yeah. I am totally fine still giving this advice until this is fixed, I guess, or confirmed to be fixed. I know that whatever it is I just installed still has the problem. So, resolve URL loader. Yeah, in chat, this was open in July of 2016, so this is a long-running issue that has still been an issue. So I think this is all I need. I'm going to see which things I need to do. I think it was just an npm install and a composer install. Is there a yarn? Yeah. I'm going to use yarn instead. I've never used Jigsaw before, so this will be interesting. I'm not sure how much of it is. Huh. and then Composer install. And then I think it was yarn run dev. All right. Yeah, run dev. All right. Run the build to generate the site, and then you can use vendor bin jigsaw to serve. All right, yarn run dev. Cool. All right, ls build local. I wonder if Valet just handles this. Tailwind CSS. Docs.test. Yeah, okay, cool. So it looks like it works. Says is using, let's see if Laravel Valet has a specific driver for this. Laravel Valet. Yeah, that must be why it's working, because it works exactly that way. Cool. All right, so let's go and learn more. Installation. Head down to here. Note for SAS users, due to an unresolved issue with one of Encore's dependencies, to use SAS with Tailwind, you'll need to disable the resolve URL loader. I think this looks good. It helps new people take a look at this as an option. I know the thing that bothered me the most was previously, because the docs were there for Laravel Mix, I knew there was a problem, but I had no idea how to handle it with Encore, because Encore, although it's very similar to Mix, it's still doing something different and doing things very differently. So I think this is going to be good to go. So let's go ahead, check out the Encore SAS Tailwind. All right. So add notes and Tailwind working. Here's a case where I did the all. Origin. All right, let's go ahead and open a pull request. All right. Cool. All right. So where are we at? Looks like we're almost out of time for today. We did get Tailwind installed, and we did get the docs for Tailwind, SAS, and Encore created and submitted as a pull request. So I think I'm going to save the rest of these items for the next session. Thank you all for joining. If you could give me feedback somehow, visit astrocast.com, sign up for the newsletter, send an email to hello@astrocast.com. Let me know how it went, and looking forward to seeing you all again.